So the good thing is my presentation isn't in the afternoon because every time I talk about finance, I get the glazed deer in the headlights look. So I'm sure hopefully everybody had their coffee. We're ready to go. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, give you some context, then go into the company, how we're structured, and then we'll go into finance presentation. So as Lauren said, I actually spent the first 12 years in the hospitality industry, actually working for Starwood Hotels, Omni, Marriott in food and beverage management. That's when I first got my love for wine, and it's kind of carried me through. In 1998, I got my MBA at Washington University in St. Louis, and as Lauren said, I spent the last 20 years working for Fortune 200. Prior to being CFO with the Thornhill companies, I spent 4 years at Treasury Wine Estates as their commercial finance director, responsible for half the U.S. markets, so everything east 27 markets for their P&L division, for the P&L, as well as setting strategic pricing. Currently CFO. So what is Thornhill Companies? Thornhill Companies is really the umbrella brand for as far as wine. We have Biennacido Estates. Some movie trivia for you. If you ever saw the movie Sideways, Biennacido Estates was referred to in that movie at least 4 or 5 times with the concept of Pinot Noir. There's Biennacido Vineyards and Solomon Hill. Next, you have the Miller Family Wine Company, which is really the growth engine for the company. It includes French Camp Vineyards, Miller Family Wines, where we have our own core 4 brands. We do have a private label division as well, and then production facilities. And then we have the ranches, which is basically farming. We do avocados, blueberries, and lemons, Camarillo, Carlisle. And then we have Bagshaw Investments. We have real estate holdings. We're getting ready to actually open up a hotel, Candler Hotel in Atlanta in the next several months. So pretty diversified company, and certainly as it relates to wine, the most vertically integrated winery on the Central Coast. So when we talk about Biennacidos and Solomon Hills, because of the really the reputation of the vineyard and just the high quality, it's an allocation model. So they both, for Solomon Hills and Biennacidos, they lie 8 miles within each other. They have very different terroir. So it helps with as we make our grapes and sell our fruit, it's very much in demand, very much an allocation model. Biennacido is in the Santa Maria Valley AVA. It's cool climate, so it has that ocean influence, and the soil structure is pretty diverse, primarily chalk, gravelly loam, and marine loam. The vineyard itself, as I mentioned, has had tremendous accolades. It's top 5 California vineyards, Wall Street Journal, 10 best vineyards in the U.S. by Food and Wine, California's best single vineyards wine enthusiast. And the bottle program throughout the years, the brands have scored 90 plus across some of the bigger publications. Miller Family Wine Company, as I said, it's really kind of the driver for the Thornhill companies. It's vineyards, it's branded wines, control label, and production. So French Camp versus Biennacido. Biennacido is about 840 planted acres. French Camp Vineyard is roughly 1,200 acres, located in Paso Robles, and we have Paso Robles Highlands as our sub-AVA. Sustainably farmed, SIP certified, one of the largest certified vineyards in the Central Coast. We have 4 core brands currently. We have Smashberry, as Chris referred earlier in his presentation, yes, we're in cans as well. We have Ballard Lanes, we have Barrel Burner, and J. Wilkes as our 4 core brands. With our control label, we have pretty extensive control label business with some big customer relationships, including Trader Joe's, Total Wine, Specs, Lionstone. We do vertical integration from everything from working with the retailer to do concept design all the way through bottling. And we also have our own in-house compliance to help the retailer along that process. We also have 2 production facilities, one in Santa Maria, where it can do up to 10,000 tons of fresh fruit, custom crush, roughly 2.5 million gallons of liquid storage capacity. It's CCOF certified, and also consolidated case goods warehouse. All right, so that kind of gives you the context, which will lead into how you can position your company for success, whether it's a small regional producer or larger. Really, the concept remains the same. The first thing you really need to do is create a roadmap to follow. You need to change the culture to being proactive versus reactive and letting events dictate your decisions, right? So to do that, you have to have a good understanding of not only current market conditions, but future market conditions. And as you forecast for that, you can then develop a roadmap. You should also try to utilize your company's strengths to build a robust plan and business model, right? So for the Thornhill companies, the fact that we're vertically integrated, we actually use that strength to help us manage our business. You want to transform the administrative functions, whether it's finance, operations, technology, rather than just being cost centers in your business. How can they help move the company forward in terms of what they provide and what value they provide? Last one, which really was a kind of a edict when I was at Procter and Gamble, data should always drive the decision, right? In this business, there is the art of making wine, but at the end of the day, we should really marry that with the concept of using data to drive decision making. You shouldn't go by your gut, because your gut may be wrong, but 9 out of 10 times, it's probably not. So I mentioned, understand current market trends, and there's just a few of the highlights on here, but they're publications like the Seattle report or the Turntine report, various reports that you can use, Gomberg reports, to get an understanding of the current market conditions. They also provide you with a forecast of future. So some of them is the grape supply. If you're a bulk wine producer or you're selling fresh fruit, is the supply balanced with demand, right? So last year we know for a fact that 2018 was the record harvest year for California, right? Produced close to 4.3 million tons. More and more acres are coming online by smaller players and driven by Cabernet and Pinot. Next thing is, what is the overall market growth that the industry has experienced over the last 3 years? And what is it looking to grow for the next foreseeable 3 to 5 years out? What are the packaging trends? We talked about cans. There's box wines. A lot of innovation going on right now in that space. And is sales dollar growth outpacing volume growth? Well, it is, right? What you see is a continuation of customers trading up for higher value wines, although that's beginning to slow down. A lot of the wines sub $9.99 or even $6.99 below, they're just in decline and will continue to be so. So you need to understand what wine segments are growing, what are in decline, what is the forecast. So as you model out your roadmap, you can then build a plan to optimize that. So there's a lot of future market trends going on. Probably the biggest one for suppliers is the ongoing labor shortage, right? We have minimum wage increases going up through 2022. So how do you mitigate that issue? Well, one is that the vineyards at the ranches is doing as much commercialization as you can with machinery, but you're basically restrained by how much capital you can invest, right? But that's one way. We've all seen global warming. You know, we kind of now are accepting it, but it has an impact on the vineyards for sure. You know, with the rains that has happened this year, harvest is now being pushed out further for 3 or 4 weeks, depending on where you're at. In some cases, it might affect the grapes in terms of, number of acreage. We also have frost conditions. There's a lot of different things that are playing in that area. There's imports and other lifestyle substitutes. Tomorrow they're going to talk about cannabis-infused drinks, or there's cannabis-infused wine. That will continue to grow. So what does that impact on the traditional wine segment? You have new retail channels that are emerging, right? Now you have Bed Bath & Beyond selling wine. You have Starbucks, movie theaters. The realization is that, because of the record harvest that we had last year, there's a glut of bulk wine on the market, and that will continue to be the case and the cycle foreseeably for at least the next 2 to 3 years. And what that's going to do is unfortunately result in price compression. It's definitely a buyer's market, right? There's going to be much more spot pricing versus contracts. So that's another trend that you'd have to take in mind. So I said, one of the things you want to do is use your company's strengths, right? So the Miller Family Wine Company basically has 4 sales channels, right? We have fresh fruit or grape sales. We've got bulk wine sales, our production services, so custom crush, bottling, and we have case goods sales. And within that, we have direct to consumer, we have our private label, and our core 4 brands. There's advantages and disadvantages of kind of pivoting as market conditions change, pivoting the different sales channels. Well, grape sales continue to be a stable market for Biennacido because of the quality of grapes. We really do not have, it's really allocated. We have typically the same customer set that continue to buy grapes from us year in and year out. So it's a stable market in that you want to try to get as pre-harvest contracts, as much pre-harvest contracts as you can, really before going into harvest to really not go into the spot market. Because once you go into the spot market and you're heading towards September or October, it becomes a fire sale. And so the extent that you can lock down those pre-harvest contracts, you want to do that. Disadvantage right now is that the margins aren't terrible, but they're not as high as you would see in the case goods business. And right now it's a buyer's market, right? So it is what it is. It's, if you're selling a house and it's a buyer's market, you're going to basically get what the market will bear. Next is bulk wine sales. So for our company, we produce quite a bit of bulk wine. We also use it to serve, in some cases, as a release valve for our inventory. So if our case goods business is trending down, we can then take that bulk wine and sell on the market, and that bulk wine could have been reserved for some case goods program or brand. So we can pivot that way. Unfortunately, it's low margin, even the best of times. It's not great margin. Again, it's a buyer's market for at least the next 2 or 3 years. And if you shift that way, you have the risk of aged inventory. And as each year passes, you get more and more costs associated with that particular vintage, and it just creeps up. And you could be in risk of being upside down when you try to sell that out. So production services, when we talk about bottling or we talk about custom crush, if you're smart and you're planning your bottling schedule, you have opportunities or pockets of where the winery is down, there's not a lot going on. That's where you should really take advantage of bottling opportunities, looking to bring in some outside customers that can bring in revenues and at the end of the day help lower your fixed overhead. Disadvantage, well, if you don't plan properly, you could actually risk your internal business because you brought a customer in to do some bottling and you need it for your case goods business, and then it could infect your internal operations. So case goods business has high margins. As you look across where we're at, we have DTC, highest margin out of the case goods, direct to the consumer. And that could be through wine clubs, it could be through tasting rooms. We're opening up J. Wilkes tasting room mid-October in Santa Barbara. So it has the potential to do significant higher volumes in terms of margin. And you don't necessarily need to drive the volume. So, the next is private label and brand. We're focusing our efforts on growing our brands. Our private label business is pretty extensive. It's around 200,000 cases across some of the retailers that you saw. The reality is, the retailer wants the best wine at the lowest possible cost. And so when you look at those case goods margins versus your own brand, there's a significant difference. So while we will continue to grow our private label business, that will be in single digit growth, a lot of our sales and marketing efforts will be with our brands, gaining distribution throughout the markets. So one of the things that you would talk about transfer administrative functions, and for the finance organization, and we'll touch upon it a little bit, but it's really any back of the house operation that is not generating revenue for the company. You want to make sure and instill the concept that you need to be adding value in whatever you're doing. And we'll talk about how that translates for finance, but they shouldn't be seen as simply cost centers for your company. The other thing to do is, if it's not in your core competency, for example, if you have a payroll department or some other area or an HR department, the company's pretty small, you might want to consider outsourcing if it's not a core competency. So that really kind of frees up the focus on on other things like driving revenue for your business. So when I talk about transform administrative functions, so for the finance area, finance and accounting area, their aspiration should be to be business partners focusing on delivering insight and value through the analysis of data to allow the business unit managers or the vineyard managers to make better informed decisions, which ultimately will lead to indirectly better business performance. So that is their aspiration, and how they do it. There's who we are, what they provide, and how we do it. And this is really kind of the model for them. They shouldn't just be seen as somebody just doing budgeting, somebody just basically, the way I describe it to the organization is anybody can read an analysis if you're looking budget versus actual. You hand your internal stakeholder, if it's a business unit manager, and say, well, you're over X amount in operational supplies. Well, that business unit manager can read that too. You're not adding any value. What you need to come to the table with is doing analysis, providing them a pathway or solution, either to get back on budget and help that individual along, and come with a solution rather than just spouting a variance to analysis. Anybody can do that. One of the key things that you need to do, and whatever business you have, is you have to have key performance indicators to understand and measure your company performance. These are just 6 of them, and there's plenty of them, but you should customize it to your particular organization. That basically is a dashboard. If you're in your car and you're driving, you look at it and see if your gas tank is full or empty. You see if the oil indicator is out. These are key indicators, performance indicators for your company, so that you can look on a monthly basis and determine how well the company's performing, how well the company's health is, right? So it could be return on sales, looking at your gross margins. It could be days sales outstanding, how quickly you're getting invoices, your customers are paying their invoices, which ultimately can affect your cash flow. There's a lot of them. These are just 6, but the point is, if you have that in place on a monthly basis, you can understand where you're going down in terms of the road. If you don't have in place, then there's no guardrails, and that's when things happen, right? So you want to really use that to have these in place to drive your company forward. So in summary, really quick, you want to adopt a very proactive culture by, number one, understanding the state of the business in which you're in, and the general trends that are probably going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years. You want to build a business plan that is based on your company's strengths, whatever that may be. Ensure that your back of the house operations add value. If they don't want to add value, you should look, and it's not a core competency, you should look to potentially outsource that in a way to drive savings and focus on the things that you need to focus on. Always use data to drive decision-making process. Yes, winemaking is an art, but it also has to marry with the key data to really drive decisions. And lastly, use KPIs, key performance indicators, that measure your company performance, a simple dashboard so you can understand at any given time where your company's health is and how it's performing. With that, I'll take some Q&A. We've got about 5 minutes.
have a mic.
Okay.
Bring it over.
If I sort of marry up your two presentations, I sort of hear that you're in a diverse business model, and then you're speaking about supplying to retailers and maybe making that transition. You've successfully managed that business. When your current customer becomes your competitor and you want to play in both ponds, do you sort of have any words of wisdom of growing your business into transitioning that and managing those relationships? Because it's different teams, it's different profitabilities. Somebody you're paying slotting to on one side, maybe you're not on the other, so it gets to be a really interesting scenario.
Yeah, I really think it's hard to do that. Case in point, and Costco, we have our brands in there, but we also have private label. But fortunately for us, when we do that, we look at our segment versus commercial versus prestige, kind of the $11 to $20 bottle and luxury. We try, as we enter into deals with retailers, if our brands are in there, we try to make sure that it's in a segment that we're not heavily vested in. Okay, so that's kind of how we address it.
On your 3D model,
Yep.
most of the data, at least that we see, is historic. So unless you're just wicked smart, how do you keep from chasing your tail?
What do you mean by historic?
It's what we sold last month, last year, last quarter, whatever. What brands are trending, but it's what's happened, not there's no prediction. You have to turn around and predict that. So how do you prevent? I mean, how do you just?
So for our case, if you would look at our bulk wine and case goods business, first of all, we have a forward-looking 5-year plan. We focus on the year plan ahead. We have day one, we have a snapshot in time, which is our budget, and we actualize that against our budget, which then becomes the plan. As we go forward and we see whether or not we're hitting plan, we will then go back and reforecast. So rather than wait for all the marbles to fall, if we are in half the year, which we're in now, and we're tracking below our plan in case goods, then we might then shift the bulk wine that was reserved for case goods. Now we're going to sell that on the open market. So there's a way to kind of use that data and basically forecast where you're going to be. If you have a sales team or one or two individuals that are out there that are selling, and you can get some insight from them. You can definitely get insight from where everything is tracking monthly from any CIATA report for bulk wine. So yeah, you're kind of using you're a month behind in terms of using the data, but it should also provide you with the ability to say, well, I now need to steer a course in a different direction.
Time for one last question. I think we have one over here.
Thanks, Evan. When you look at the differences between your branded business and your private label business and control label, how do you think about just sort of the margin differential between those two? And then secondly, do you look at using basically the same routes to market, the same distributor networks and so forth between the two? No,
so that's good. That's a good question. Thank you. The margins are pretty significant with the private label and the case good, our own branded case goods business. When you do a retailer, you kind of, for example, Trader Joe's, you're eliminating really the distributor. You're going directly to them, which is great. But unfortunately, what they require is a much lower FOB or selling price per case than you would for a traditional branded product which goes through a distributor. And you're talking, a difference of anywhere from $20 to $40 a case difference in FOB. Yes, you don't have that distributor, but at the same time, because you're starting with much lower price per case, your margins are getting squeezed in that regard. All right, thank you very much.